Woohoo! Alrighty. Welcome back to BeekTalk. This is episode number 4. And today we're talking about some of the introductory topics that you need to think about before getting started with keeping bees. So I'm glad to have everyone on this call. I'm very excited to be doing these BeekTalks, and I'm very happy about the feedback I get back from you. So absolutely share these BeekTalks with anyone that you know who's a beekeeper, or anyone that you know who you think is going to be interested in beekeeping. I'm just going to share this right now. Yeah, like I said, today we're going to be talking about what you need to know before you get started. I've been keeping bees for 14 years, and I've been teaching beekeeping for about 4 years, and I have a blast with it. And what breaks my heart is seeing people who are excited about bees, excited to save the bees, and they jump right into it without doing any research or really reading into it. So I like to help people out. I'm going to take your hand and guide you through some of the things that you should think about before you get started owning bees. If you are currently a beekeeper and there's some ideas or some things that you think people should consider, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to read them out and hear what you guys think. And of course, if there's anything that you think I'm leaving out that you think I should include, let me know. Also, if you have bees, I want to know how many hives you have. I'd like this to be a give and take and a discussion. If there's some things that you're not that confident about, or things that you'd like to learn a little bit more about, I need ideas for shows for BeekTalk. So absolutely, I want to hear what you have to say. So keeping bees has many benefits. It's not only is it great for the environment and the ecosystem, but it's a fun hobby that has a lot of great physical exercise. It's also really mentally stimulating. I find that a lot of beekeepers love beekeeping because it is kind of an intellectual journey. There's always something to learn about. There's always something to read about. There's always new methods and ideas. And that's the beauty of beekeeping. And it's also the main driver for why I started this show. So we can talk about the different ideas. So since beekeeping is basically just understanding the physical needs of honeybees, it's also just figuring out how we as the beekeepers can supply the things that those bees need to survive and thrive. Plus, it's great for the flowers and the trees and the water, and you also get the sweet return of honey and wax right from your own backyard. So that being said, there are a lot of things to consider and think about before you jump right into keeping bees. I'm going to talk about a lot of them today. Although honeybees are insects, for us, they're pets. And although they're not cuddly and they don't live in your house, they still are pets. They're still living beings that need, some constant attention. And yeah, you definitely have to pay attention to your bees and to be watching over them. We are their stewards. And although bees are a lot, I don't want to say easier, but they're a bit more hands-off than keeping a dog or say, you still need to pay them some attention. They're still living creatures and you have to take care of them. There's some products on the market that lead you to believe that keeping bees is kind of like a plug and play. Buy this hive, add bees, you'll get honey. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of research and things that you need to do to get started. Like I said, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. The person who has the best comment or my favorite comment will get one of these really cool BeekTalk stickers up here. If you don't want to wait till the end to see if you win the sticker, you can also purchase any of these cool stickers at blossombuzzbees.buzz or mightfight.buzz. Those are my two websites. I have them in the comments here. Yeah, so let's jump right in. there's three main considerations I want you to take into consideration before you start keeping bees. That's time, space, and money commitment. So as far as time goes, keeping bees requires less time than walking your dog or scooping cat litter or things like that. They do require a bit more time than keeping fish. So that's our little balance there. I would say you should factor anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour for each hive every week. So if you ideally want to keep 3 hives, you should prepare to spend an hour and a half to 3 hours a week on beekeeping things. In the summertime, that is directly keeping the bees, feeding them, making sure they're healthy, doing your inspections, pulling honey, things like that, all requires time. In the winter, when the bees are dormant, there's less for us to do as the beekeeper, but there's other projects. So that things like painting woodenware, acquiring and building new woodenware, general maintenance, cleaning, like I said, painting, things like that. It all takes time. So the more hives you have, of course, the more time you need to spend on those things. The other big time-consuming part of keeping bees is continuing education. I recommend to all people who are thinking about keeping bees to look at your first year with bees kind of as a 2-year process. Your first year should be learning about bees, and then your second year in the spring, you get bees and physically learn about the bees with the bees tangibly. This allows you mentally the time needed to prepare for the interactions and the situations you encounter when you physically have bees. And believe me, you can spend a whole year learning and just making decisions on the kind of hives you want to have, maybe the kind of bees you want to keep, the approaches you take towards beekeeping. So definitely you need to do a lot of research before you get involved with bees. But if you're listening to this Beak Talk, you're already off on the right foot. So we'll keep going and we're moving right along. Like I said, your whole first year should really be designated to purchasing equipment, deciding what equipment you want to purchase, and learning about the culture of honeybees. Being that they're social beings, there's a lot of interactions you need to learn about, and there's classes and castes, and you really need to know that stuff before you get bees. Otherwise, you'll be at a disadvantage. People who I teach, the folks who study for a year or two before they get bees are way better off than the folks who just gung-ho and do it year one. I'm not trying to discourage you, but I'm trying to be completely transparent and put the cards on the table. So that's your time commitment. The next thing you need is a space commitment, and it's different for everybody. Some people have all the space that they need. Other folks are maybe renting an apartment or living with family, and your space is tight. So I'm going to break space requirements into 2 groups: indoor storage and apiary space. As far as indoor storage goes, a garage, a basement, a shed, a lean-to. Some people make shanties out of pallets. This is a space that does not need to be climate controlled, but does need to be protected from the weather, and also protected from like mice and pests. And of course, there's varying degrees. Some beekeepers don't store their equipment in anything. They just keep it out in the open. That's not necessarily the best practice. And since my target audience for Beak Talk is new beekeepers, I'd like to set you off on the right foot. So what you need is 25 to 50 square foot of indoor space. Like I said, a shed, a garage, a basement, that's all good. Keep in mind, this is outside equipment that you're going to be moving in and out. So if your basement has carpeting that you want to keep nice, you might not want to be trucking the supers back and forth with muddy boots. So a garage or shed space is the best. And of course, anything that's closest to the apiary is way a benefit. More experienced beekeepers will tell you that their first apiaries were back up on a hill, and their more recent apiaries require the ability to drive a vehicle right up to them. I myself am a beekeeper like that. Yeah, so like I said, 25 to 50 square foot is a ballpark. Of course, if you have over 4 or 5 hives, you might need more space. And if you only have 2, a really well thought out shelf could do you really well. I run anywhere, say 50 colonies, and I have 2 nice shelves in my garage, and maybe 20 square feet of additional floor space. 20 square feet sounds like a lot, but it's really 5 foot by 4 foot. So that's a small patch. That's kind of like the size of this desk. Not a lot of space. Next, you need apiary space. This is where you're physically keeping the beehives. This should be outside in a sunny spot. I figure 100 square feet is good for this. 100 square feet sounds like a lot, but it's 10 foot by 10 foot. That can hold 4 hives really comfortably. Of course, you can squeeze many more hives in there, but it'll hold 4 hives comfortably. And I think that's a good apiary to get started with. This space probably is going to require a fence, most likely an electric fence. Those are things to consider and to research. In my last episode, BeekTalk 3, I talked about apiary planning quite a bit. So you can reference that one on my YouTube on Might Fight or Blossom and Buzz Bees on Facebook. And of course, electric fences is going to be a whole separate discussion. I'm sure beekeepers out there have some experience with not having electric fences or bears still getting through electric fences, but that's a whole nother discussion. So we talked about your time commitment. We talked about your space commitment. If you have any questions so far about anything that I've talked about, drop them in the comments below so I can address them. And like I said, the best comment gets a really cool BeekTalk sticker right here. So certainly I want to hear from you. And if you drop a comment, also let me know where you're located because that'll help me answer your question. Yeah, so we talked about time, we talked about space. Now we have to talk about money considerations. Now, every hobby is expensive. You can read books and stuff like that, and that gets expensive. If you soup up cars, that is a money sink. Same thing with keeping horses and stuff like that. So every hobby requires money. Beekeeping is not as expensive as souping up cars or keeping horses, but it is still expensive. You are able to get your annual expense for beekeeping down to only $100 or $2 per year, which is pretty manageable, and you can actually make a profit from bees after your first couple of years. But I'm going to be really transparent with you and say that the first 2 or 3 years, you're probably not going to make money from keeping bees, and it's going to cost some money to get going. I would say your direct costs for starting up with 2 hives, your equipment, your bees is going to be about $1,000. And I recommend that you break this up into 2 years. Like I said, your first year, you can purchase equipment and learn about beekeeping, take classes, buy books. Your second year, you can purchase the bees and all the other expenses that come with keeping bees. So you can get some information about the startup with keeping bees on my website, blossombuzzbees.buzz. I also have some suggested hives and things. I'm going to talk about hive configurations in a few more minutes, but I just want to finish off the money expenses. I already talked about that. Let me see where I am in my notes. The other major cost with your first year of keeping bees is an electric fence or fencing your apiary. And this is entirely dependent on you, your style, your property, and where you're keeping bees. I have some beekeeper friends who are in Philadelphia, and they don't need electric fences because they're either keeping bees on a roof, keeping bees on a boat, keeping bees in a church property that has a fence, and there's, they're in the middle of a city, so there's no pests. So that's fine. They don't have to make up any extra money for keeping the fence. Here in the Pocono Mountains, northeastern Pennsylvania, I recommend everyone who's keeping bees on the ground to have an electric fence. And that's anywhere from $200 to $500, depending on your property, your style, if there's electricity available. There's a lot of factors. But an electric fence is definitely something you should look into before you purchase bees. Oh, I have a comment from Jeremy. He asks, where do you recommend to purchase the items you need to get started? That's a great question. I have a list of suggested products on my website. I dropped it in the comments. It is blossombuzzbees.buzz. There's also a bunch of other distributors, some people like Dadant or Better Bee or Man Lake. Those are some basically like Tractor Supply of beekeeping. But distributors and sourcing materials is definitely a whole other beak talk that we can get into. Thank you for your comment, Jeremy. Now we're going to talk about hive styles. And this is something that you can really spend a long time researching and deciding. And I really encourage you to do this research before you get bees, because if you just wing it, you'll probably wind up spending money on extra equipment that might not be ideal for your approach to beekeeping. So there's a lot of different styles of hives that you can choose from. Dozens and dozens of different styles. Some of them are illegal to keep here in the US, but any hive that has combs that you can move and manipulate, those are all legal hives. The most famous is the Langstroth hive. That is the bread and butter. That is the staple of beekeeping. And what's really cool is it's actually invented here in Pennsylvania. Man, I probably will do 2 or 3 whole episodes just about the Langstroth hive system. But since today we're focused on considerations before you get started, I'm going to do a quick run through of just the basics. So like I said, Langstroth hive, the movable frame hive, or the Lang system, all the same thing, and it revolves around this frame. This is a black plastic foundation that they build comb on, and this is where the bees live. It looks like my green screen back here. It is the infrastructure of the beehive. This is the roads and the hotels and the apartments of honeybees. And this frame is what makes it easy and legal in the United States. This is a deep frame, which is kind of the industry standard. But they also have medium frames, which are just a few inches shorter. I think this is 9 inches. The medium frames are 6 inches. Again, that's some research you have to do. You need to decide whether you want to include this plastic foundation, or if you want to use wax, or if you want to do no foundation. Those are decisions you have to make. You have to decide if you're even going to use the Langstroth hive. I implore you to use it because it is the industry standard. And I recommend that you get a few years of keeping Langstroth hives under your belt before you move to more exotic and niche hives. So if you want to start with a Warre hive or a top bar hive, I recommend that you keep Langstroth hives for a few years just to learn the basics of keeping bees. So you have to choose between using deep frames or medium frames. Some beekeepers, historically for the last century and a half, have been using a combination of those two, deeps and mediums. Some more modern beekeepers are choosing to do mediums only because it's a little bit lighter. It's better for the back. So some lady beekeepers or shorter beekeepers like it because it's a bit lighter. To be honest, I've been keeping bees for 14 years. If I could go back and start over, I would start over pretty much using only mediums, simply because they're lighter and easier to use. Other considerations, I should also mention, these frames stack together in the hive, and in addition to choosing whether you want mediums or deeps or both or a combination, you have to decide if you want 10 frames or 8 frames. 10 frames is the industry standard, but 8 frames is favored by a lot of hobbyists. It's entirely up to you, but my experience recommendation is to choose either 8 frame or 10 frame and stick with that completely. I know some beekeepers who have a little bit of both, and it's kind of a mess trying to make them all work together. Medium frames and deep frames are compatible across 8s and 10s. However, 8 frame equipment is not compatible with 10 frame and vice versa. So definitely think about that, and you have to do a lot more research into that. I'm only touching this topic. If you want to take a class with me, I offer classes in January, and again, you can sign up for those on Blossom Buzz Bees. But yeah, so I already talked about the two sizes. I know a beekeeper who just started a few years ago, and she only keeps 8 frame equipment and only mediums. And let me tell you, I watched her do a few inspections, and it is smooth like butter. She doesn't have to guess how many frames or do any kind of cross calculations to see how many frames she has. However many boxes times 8, that's it. She doesn't have to transfer things. It's all the same style equipment, and it makes it really easy to do beekeeping. And it's also a lot more efficient because she doesn't have to keep multiples of various different styles of equipment. So that's one consideration. So like I said, only quick touching this topic. This could be a 5-hour, a 10-hour discussion about Langstroth equipment, talking about the history. I'm just doing a quick skim. So I like to have my content available to everybody. So I want to talk about some considerations for folks with physical disabilities or limitations. If you are bound to a wheelchair, or if you're an amputee, I'm going to be honest, it is hard to do traditional beekeeping with standard Langstroth equipment. It's hard. I either recommend, if you're dead set on doing standard Lang equipment and the standard Langstroth method, I implore you to find an assistant and to learn with a buddy or a family member, or consider modifications to the Langstroth hive. There's a few other hives that are good for folks with physical limitations, but one that I recommend that you look into, because not only is it a modified Langstroth, which is how the industry kind of teaches and explains beekeeping, but you can have this hive set at 32 or 36 inches or whatever you need. And once the hive is set, you don't have to lift anything that's immensely heavy. The heaviest thing you'll have to lift is one of these frames. And when it's full of honey, it can weigh about 10 pounds, which isn't too bad. It's the only thing that you can do to make beekeeping lighter is use medium frames instead of deep frames. But basically what it is instead of stacking these frames on top of each other, you stack these frames long. So instead of growing the hive vertically, you grow the hive horizontally. So instead of lifting 10 frames at a clip that can weigh 90 pounds, you're only lifting one at a time and just scooching them over. You can stay seated. It's great for children. So if you're in a, like myself, in an educator situation, and let's say you want to teach kids at a church or a school how to keep bees, a long lang hive might be a good hive for you. They need some other attention for winterizing, and there's some other approaches to beekeeping for that style of hive. But if you have physical limitations, you can't lift 60 pounds to chest height, I think this might be a good hive for you, and a good way to not exclude you from being a beekeeper. So there's that. Now, one other aside to all of my Langstroth hive asides. If you're starting out, the industry standard is to keep wood equipment because that's what the bees historically have liked. However, there's been a new advancement in in apiculture, and it's called the Apimaye hive. Apimaye, Apimaye. I have a link to it on my website, Blossom Buzz Bees, where you can check those out. I know a beekeeper who is transitioning her apiary to be only Apimaye, and she likes it quite a bit. Apimaye is a plastic hive that still uses the Langstroth frame. So it's very compatible and integratable to beekeepers who have already started. However, if you are new and just starting out, the Apimaye hives are a little bit more expensive at the initial purchasing. However, there's a lot of benefits that we're seeing. And some commercial beekeepers are transitioning they're biting the bullet, taking the cost, and transitioning their apiary to be only Apimaye. I mean, they have a better insulation value than wood, so they keep your bees warmer. They keep moisture out better. They have self-locking mechanisms. They have integrated mite controls. They're really easy to move around. They even float, I learned. If your hives get flooded and the bees float away, the Apimaye hives float. So if you're doing research on what hive you want, I implore you to at least give Apimaye a look. They're really new, but I think they're going to be favored in a few years. And again, I have links to that on my suggested products. So now that we're out of the weeds on my Langstroth talk, if you need any clarification for anything that I just ran through, like I said, I did a really quick, possibly the quickest touch that I could do on all of those Langstroth topics. If you need any clarification, drop them in the comments below. I really like to answer these questions, even when I'm not actively on the live stream. If I have ended the live stream, I still want to hear your questions, and I can answer them after the fact. Yeah, so definitely drop those in the comments below, or if there's any topics that you want me to talk about in the future. I think next week's BeekTalk, Tuesday at 4, is going to be about gifts to get beekeepers. We're coming down the pike for the holiday season, and I think next week might be nearing the end of when you can make emergency purchases for the holidays. And if I am any indicator to what the other beekeepers are like, beekeepers are probably a little hard to get gifts for. So I have some recommendations. Yes. Let me see where I'm at. We're out of the weeds for this. If you're purchasing gifts for someone who you might think like beekeeping or might be interested in it, I have classes starting in January that are really introductory. So those might be a good thing to get your family or your friends. I do have 3 books that I'm going to recommend, and I'm going to talk about them really quick. Like I said, getting started with bees is not really as glorious as you might initially think. If you want to be successful and do the bees a justice, I recommend that you educate yourself for your first year. This will prevent you from making silly mistakes and spending money on things that you don't need. Education is really valuable, and it will let you know if you are in over your head or if you are going down a hole that you're not that interested in. Oh, I have a friend on who says, be successful. Yes, be successful. So we're going to talk about some of these books. If you are interested in taking any of my beekeeping classes that I have on Blossom Buzz Bees, let me just copy the link here and I'll post it right here in the chat here. But this book is called Story's Guide to Keeping Bees. It's written by Malcolm Sanford and Richard Bonney. This is a rock solid book. Man, this book, this is my textbook basically for the beekeeping classes. It is incredibly detailed, but yet concise in how it delivers the information. Things from the origins and history of beekeeping, a bee's life, about taking the crops and managing bees, all about pests. It takes you from hobbyist to commercial beekeeper. This is a great book. StreamYard, the platform that I'm using right now, doesn't like the link that I shared. So you'll definitely have to get these suggested links at my website here, that hopefully StreamYard will like that link instead. Now, the next book that I want to talk about, let me finish on this. Story's Guide. This is really for folks who are ready to get knee-deep in beekeeping. For folks who are kind of homesteaders or gardeners, if you have chickens, you might like the Beekeeper's Bible. This is, now it's a hefty book. I think it's 400 or 500 pages, 412 pages, but it's really cool. It has nice pictures, so it's not solid text all the way around. It's called the Beekeeper's Bible, and it doesn't want to tell me who wrote it. Oh, Stuart Tabori. This is a good book. It does not talk about in great detail the physiology and the culture of honeybees, but it does have a lot of different topics. It talks about wax and propolis. It gives you recipes. It talks about beekeeping folklore, which is a delight of mine. Uses for honey, ancient uses for honey. Again, there's artifacts and pictures of things. This is a cool read. I haven't read it cover to cover because there's a lot of pictures and I get distracted, but it is a good read, and it's also a good coffee table book. If you're a person who likes nature and likes ecology and things like that, I think this is just a fun book to have around. And every page has a digestible fact for a person who is not as interested in beekeeping as I am. So if you are just somewhere picking up this book, my button undid, you'll be able to find a cool fact on any page in this book. And then lastly, another book that I recommend is Honeybee Democracy. And this is written by Thomas Steele. Man, this might be one of my favorite books. I'm a fan of politics. Yeah, it does have a gorgeous cover. I am a fan of politics and bees being social creatures. Not only do they interact with other bees outside of their own colony, but they have incredibly intricate communication systems within the beehive. And Honeybee Democracy talks about those systems. It talks a lot about how the experiments and how we learned a lot of what we know about the way bees communicate. It talks about some gentlemen doing some studies in the 40s about honeybees and the way they swarm and things like that. This is a good book. And what I like about it is it talks about honeybees, but it doesn't make it entirely honeybee centric. So if you are a person who likes social sciences or like political sciences, this is a good book to read because it talks about decision making and how the group makes decisions. And I think there's a lot of value in that, even outside of a honeybee sense. Now, I would skip this read if you are not interested in politics and you're a brand new beekeeper. And it sounds funny to not recommend a book that I recommend, but if you are brand new at beekeeping, there's a lot of bee details in here that you can overlook if you're not a beekeeper and get right to the gist of it. But if you are interested in bees, you might get caught in the weeds with this book. So I would recommend for your first year to do research like a stories guide, watch people on YouTube, watch these BeekTalks, and then after keeping bees for a year or two, then come back to this book and give it a read. Because man, you will understand some really cool, intricate facets of the way that honeybees communicate. And I think beekeepers, even if you read this book, come back to it 2 or 3 years later and read it again, because there's a lot of awesome details. And again, I'm not sure if I just love this book because it's right up my alley, or if it's just a tremendous book that is perfect for beekeepers all around. But again, I have links to all of these books on my website. I have the classes that you can sign up for starting in January. You can give the classes to family and friends. And of course, I have these BeekTalks. If you have any comments, any ideas about beekeeping or any things that you think I should include, absolutely drop them in the comments. Even after the stream is over, I love to get that feedback. And again, you should be liking Might Fight and Blossom and Buzz Bees on Facebook. And I also archive all of these BeekTalks on Might Fight on YouTube. So I'm developing a YouTube channel there. Hopefully when it gets warm outside and I'm actually with the bees, I can do methods videos and things like that. So I really want to help you become a better beekeeper. Yeah, and let me just check and see if I have any other things that I want to include. But either way, I think I'm going to wrap up this BeekTalk. I appreciate everyone who commented on the live stream. I'll come back through and write some comments back to you. If you know any beekeepers or people who might be interested, please share this video with them. I'm growing this business and I really want to spread the good word about bees and things like that. So if you could help me out, that'd be great. And if not, I will catch you next week on my next episode of BeekTalk. Thank you.